To many, Armageddon happened last year. In March 2020, several European countries entered lockdown, changing radically how we had lived until then. When it comes to the work environment, it triggered two major shifts. One, remote working went mainstream. Second, to respond to the new circumstances, many organizations started at high speed, prioritizing and accelerating their digital transformation. In this episode of TechTalk, Luis and I speak with Ken Ducatel, IT Security Director at DG Digit, the European Commission's department that provides digital services to other Commission departments and EU institutions. Ken tells us how the European Commission shifted from 4,000 daily remote workers to 35,000 over just one weekend, and he shares his team's experience in accelerating the digital transformation of this large public organization. So, let's start.
Welcome to a new episode of Tech Talk. This is the episode 9, season 4. We call it the one on how the lockdown triggered digital change, and more specifically, digital change at the European Commission. Today we are with Ken Ducatel, and he's an IT security director at the DG Digit. Am I right, Ken? Did I say that right? Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Luis, and thanks for having me. Yeah, exactly right. I'm director of IT security. I normally do it the other way around. Which means I'm responsible for running the cybersecurity for the whole of the European Commission.
Well, that's like a huge responsibility. Welcome, Carla. You are
I am there. I am here. Hi, Ken. Welcome.
Hi, Carla.
So, without further delay, let's start the conversation. Remember, TechTalk is technology made simple over coffee. So go and grab a nice cup of coffee and let's get started.
Okay, well, I'm British, so I'm having my cup of tea.
Okay. You got a good point there. Yes.
Fair enough. Okay, so I will kick off the conversation, Ken, with a personal question. The first lockdown started around March 2020. Maybe some places were a little bit before than that. But they took us all by surprise. I remember when the day when everything started, I talked to someone at the office saying, I feel like this is the end of the world because it has never happened to me before. What was your reaction, your first reaction when they told you have to go home?
It happened around, I think we were about the 12th of March. I remember it very well because I was renewing my marriage vows just on the 14th, which just happened. It was just in Brussels where I live. The restaurants closed on the 13th. It was the last day they were open, and our little ceremony took place on the 14th. And then the following week, things went fully into lockdown in Brussels. So we went from one situation to the other situation, really in a matter of days. My first reaction was actually relief. So I'm running a team of about 100 people. In Luxembourg and in Brussels, and what I could see that the people were starting to get very stressed about the situation, and the Commission took the decision. I think it was absolutely the right decision that we were going to go into a working from home mode, and this went very, very quickly from the initial idea, which was to have an A team and a B team to reduce the population in the offices, 1 week A team, 1 week B team. And then also limiting transmission risks to a complete lockdown, with basically everyone working from home who could work from home 100% of the time. But my initial reaction was relief that we were actually taking this decision and protecting our staff.
Yeah. I remember. Also PwC was at some point kind of flirting with the idea of having some people working, some people at home, but in the end, the decision was similar to the one you took.
In fact, if I remember correctly, in a few weeks before leading to the lockdown, we had to take our laptops every day with us. So there was this expectation that this would happen at any moment.
At any point in time,
during your presentation at the PwC Cybersecurity Days in October last year, and that's also kind of the reason why you are here with us today, You mentioned that the European Commission shifted from 4,000 daily remote workers to 35,000 over one weekend. And that's a huge number of people. How did you pull that off in terms of technology readiness, job organization, and even shifting culture?
Mhm. It's a really interesting story. You just mentioned the fact that you were taking your laptops to and fro, and actually one of the things which allowed us to do this was that my department, which is the IT department of the European Commission, has been investing in the last few years to move from having under the desk machines and desktop machines to laptops for almost all staff. Without that, it simply wouldn't have been possible. We wouldn't have been able to offer people the opportunity to connect from home. Also, we had a large investment in remote infrastructure, so what we call My Remote, which allows people to get access as though they were in the office to an environment which is just the same as they would have in their workstation at home, in the office. So those kinds of steps were really important. And of course we had, because I'm the IT security guy, we had done a lot of the work with the infrastructure teams to make sure that this was a secure operation with effective VPN provisioning. So that was even a precondition. Then we had also been investing a lot in the IT infrastructure department in the infrastructure, and it just so happened we had just come on stream that year, the beginning of the year, with a big upgrade of our infrastructure to be able to support multiple massively parallel connections to our infrastructure.
As if someone knew what was coming.
I don't know. We had been doing this. It was part of our long-term strategic plan, but we didn't expect to be having to bring it on stream. But we had the servers, so we could actually roll out the service. And they had to do some reprioritization in the data center so that we could have sufficient capacity, but the servers were sitting there ready to be commissioned. It was a bumpy ride for the first few weeks, but I would say within the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, the capacity went up a lot. And we went from a few thousand video conferencing minutes per day to millions. And this was fundamental. Now, for my particular department, we had a decision of our top management, the corporate management board, previous year, that we should move to 24/7 services. And we had implemented that over the Christmas holiday. But that required a lot of automation of procedures and rules and so forth. So we moved to an on-call 24/7 service from beginning of 2020. And that saved us. Again, it was luck of the draw, really. We could immediately run the full set of services for all of our IT security teams remotely. And that was, otherwise I would have had to put people in the offices because these are critical staff. So we moved into remote mode very seamlessly, I would say. And it wasn't that we had a plan to how we were going to deal with a pandemic. It was really that we was part of our investments in order to support changes in the organization, which requires many more people working remotely and flexibly.
You know, actually, the third question we have prepared, it was about digital transformation and how actually the European Commission coped with this situation. But I can see, based on your answer, that you were preparing the path, not necessarily for a lockdown or this pandemic, but preparing the path to accelerate transformation and there's a long-term plan, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's clear. Then the question kind of, it doesn't become senseless, but I needed to transform it quickly now. And I thought the toughest part when it comes to digital transformation is people. So even if you have everything implemented and put in place and things running up, it's how people's mindset changed or is still changing, I guess. I don't think everybody kind of feels 100% comfortable with this. And so do you have any?
Yeah. So I think, I don't know how many years we've advanced over the past year ahead of where we would have been without this. but it's important. It's an important number. Some people say it could be as much as 10 years.
Wow.
What we see is just a massive change in people's behavior. And one example of that would be digital signing. We've moved to the situation where what was really hard because there was an organization which was still quite paper-based, to moving to a situation where the organization had certificate-based digital signing as part of the way we do business. And that was something which was available. We got the tooling there. We've improved it over the last year, but nevertheless, it was existing. It was just a question of getting people to change habits, and this forced people to change habits. So actually, that whole business of this impetus created a digital transformation track progress that we couldn't have imagined. Now, the foundation for this was already there. You're right, Luis, that we had already adopted in 2019 European Commission digital strategy. It's the first time that we have a digital strategy in the Commission for itself, which is business-driven rather than technology-driven. So our IT strategies in the past were about, how can we improve the service provisioning? Mm-hmm. But increasingly, we see that digital is not about how can we improve the services. It's partly that, but it's really about how we can transform as an organization using the digital conduit. And that was something which was really already massively moving forward, something which our previous Director General, Gertrude Ingerstad, was fostering through. And she's now actually on the first day of our lockdown, so on the 16th of March, when we stopped working from the office, she actually took up her new role as Director General for Human Resources. And her deputy, Mario Campolago, who's still there as our acting Director General, took over. So we added that embeddedness in the organization of digital already there as a potential palette of resources which could be used for supporting this process. We just didn't imagine that it would go with such a dramatic change. And then one of the other areas we see massive technology changes around cloud. Again, we had in 2019 adopted a cloud strategy for the Commission, which is applicable also to some of the other institutions, bodies and agencies of the EU. And we have, because of that, been investing heavily in creating the platforms and the services and the toolings which allowed us to move into cloud massively and securely, much faster than we would have done otherwise. So if I think about our transition to M365, for example, we have basically moved to, we're still in pilot mode to some extent, but it's heavily used across the organization because it gave us tooling in order to allow people to do their daily business.
I think you have mentioned a key word now. It's cloud.
Exactly.
Because Carla,
yes,
Carla has a question on that.
I do. Yeah, you started already mentioning, but could you tell us more about how you went about it, and if you have any advice based on your own experience for other, because many companies are now moving to cloud-based solutions, and maybe you can share a bit of your wisdom.
Can we just finish off the last question before we come back to that? It's really important, the cloud issue. Just wanted to say something about the organizational changes, because this has really been important for us, but also for the rest of the European Commission. It's clear that running teams when you simply don't see them. I mean, it's not even like traditional teleworking where you could have kind of group events to build team spirit and so forth on a regular basis. We're really completely isolated in the way that we work and have been for a long time now. And actually, one of the adaptations we've had to do is to find ways of working which keep people motivated, which keep people in touch. And we did things like in Digit anyway, where I work, we did things like actually creating a lunch break, which is between 12 and 2, so there should be no meetings at that time. Encouraging people not to work, because we have a lot of people who are very dedicated and they tend to stay connected too much. So we do regular Slidos to see how people are doing, what the reactions are and so on. Very regular town hall meetings with our staff in order to see how the temperature is. our acting director general, Mario, he does a monthly session with all staff online and so on. Because we have seen concerns about people getting isolated, particularly as we are, a lot of us are expatriates. A lot of them, people don't have their family with them. And they've been difficult for them to get home and see their families. So for a long period, it was from March through to say June, July, when things eased a bit. People weren't seeing, very often they were on their own for long periods. So the whole issue of dealing with isolation has been one of the big challenges here. I think as an organization, we've adapted to it. We certainly try to stay in touch, but it's still a big concern. And we certainly will learn a lot of the lessons coming out of this period about how to work in a more flexible sort of hybrid mode. But we will also be certainly very, very happy to get back and work in teams and see each other and have fun and events together, because that's something we're all missing. So I just wanted to complete the story, because I think the technology is just a tool which allows us to survive. Yeah, the organization and the relations are really part of it.
Indeed, the aspect of isolation, it's very important, and I think it's good that organizations and companies try as much as possible to find ways to avoid isolation.
So to go to Carla, to go back to your question about cloud now. So obviously I have a particular view on cloud because I'm the IT security guy, and there's always security concerns around cloud. However, it's more general. As I said, we adopted a strategy for the European Commission on cloud back in 2019. It's not the first thing we've done in cloud. When I first joined DG Digit back in 2014, we had just at that point, the teams were organizing the first ever cloud framework contract for the institutions, which created a platform for acquiring cloud services. So this was a kind of an update, and it was then associated also with a Cloud 2, as we call it, framework contract for all of the institutions and agencies, where we can jointly procure cloud services. And it's a very dynamic, flexible way of procuring, which is innovative, not just in terms of being cloud, but also the way in which we do the procurement, which we call it a dynamic procurement system. It's very open and allows us to get the latest, best developments in cloud available to the institutions, which I think is good. You, Luis, at the beginning, you say sometimes people see the commission and the institutions as a big block and very bureaucratic, but I think here we've really overcome what are very difficult procurement rules. Sometimes people would say cumbersome, made them more dynamic and suited to the agile environment we're now in. So we have those contracts, and that's really useful because it provides a gateway which people should pass through in order to go into the cloud. Because the issue is governance. And in the commission, what we've agreed to do is that we won't put stuff in the cloud unless it's been through the appropriate governance level. And the governance for us is at top level. It's not just by the digital people, but it's actually a governance board run by one of our deputy secretary general. So that's a vice president equivalent for in the central offices, very, very close to the CEO, our equivalent. Actually, the guy who's in charge of this, we call our chief operations officer. Gives you an idea of how high it goes in the organization. And these are the guys who sits there with a committee composed of the different departments, representative of different departments, which actually decides what the priorities are and where information systems can and can't go. Now, that's really important because the risk of cloud is it can become shadow IT, which is bad news both in terms of organization of budgetary spend, so getting value for money for the European citizens, but also to make sure that we don't do the same thing in different formats in different places, which has been in the past because each directorate general, each department is responsible for its own budget. So this governance structure is really important. But what we've done for clouds is establish a technical governance layer below. We're a cloud advisory board or cloud advisory council, where we actually sift through and make sure that when things go into the cloud, they do it in a way which is future-proofed, efficient, and secure. and that's composed of the kind of the central services which have a view on these things. And it's providing also support to a kind of a community of practice who we've established with all of the players who are in the technical teams in the different departments who are transforming the business needs, if you like, into the implementations and instances in the cloud. This for me is really important because what we've been doing in my department is both defining how you do risk assessments, and we've been building common tooling for all the institutions, bodies and agencies on doing risk assessments which are dynamic and flexible, because the technology underneath is continually changing. So the risks continually changing, and that means you need to have a way of doing risk assessments which are dynamic and not as they were in the past, once something you perhaps got around to doing every 5 or 6 years. And then from that, you can generate security plans which are operational. Too much in the past, IT security plans were documents which sat on a shelf somewhere and probably weren't implemented. So that's one side of things for cloud for me, which is really important. We have a tooling which allows departments have business needs in the cloud to actually find how they go in a secure and effective way. And they manage their assets or they can manage their assets from the point of view of risk. And on the other side, my teams, because we've been very good at developing capability to monitor our own infrastructures. Of course, this is no longer our infrastructure. So what we've done is we've created what we call landing zones, which are like templates for defining how the monitoring, detection, and so forth will work, what the logs that people will collect, and so on. And having that in a standard way is really good. The big cloud providers we've been working with are really very interactive. They're very supportive of this. And I can tell you that, when we move to the cloud, the risk is, because it's exposed, the risk is that we get compromised really quickly if there isn't a good security structure in place. So if the design has not been good, if there are exposed assets which shouldn't be exposed, the attacker will find this really fast. But what we found, because we've got these good operational relations with the cloud providers, is that they signal things really fast when we see things going wrong. They know where to go to in our organization to get it fixed, and we can get the logs we need in order to be able to do the instant response and mitigation where necessary. So I'm feeling that transformation is something where we've really done a lot. There's still a long way to go. We have these landing zones specified for the big players, the big guys, the one or two. But of course, recently we've as part of our contracting, we've established what we call a sovereign cloud contract with OVH, or for those applications which need to stay with the European footprint. And there, we need to now develop the appropriate security provisions in order to make sure that we've completely adapted to the OVH environment. So every time we get a new cloud provider coming on the stream, we have to kind of rebuild these things. And of course, the other challenge is the guys in the cloud, they're changing these all the time. So this is really hard work for us to keep up with. It's not under our control. But it's good. It's very challenging. And having common rules and a structured way in, I think it really can be a very secure way of running the business.
Ken, my next question is actually...
Can I just add one more thing, which is,
yes, of course,
which is on the cloud, which is also these guys, the cloud providers, they don't take prisoners. So the Commission runs a lot of services with member states, and it's difficult when you have 27 partners sometimes to make sure everyone's doing all the work of managing vulnerabilities and doing the upgrades. And it doesn't always work. And that then can mean we're running systems, if it's an on-premise system, we're running them with vulnerabilities or needed upgrades which can't be fixed because the service has to be provided. When you go in the cloud, forget it. The cloud provider is not going to run systems which are out of date. So that actually gives a good incentive for making sure everything's kept clean and tidy. Sorry, Luis, I interrupted.
No, it's absolutely fine. Thanks for enlightening us. So my next question, in fact, goes, you have mentioned governance, you have mentioned decision making, and what I want to bring onto the table is boards, decisions made at board level.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think board members are actually, I wouldn't say technology reluctant, but they are not technology savvy either. So does this situation have changed somehow the way they see cybersecurity? Is now part of the agenda of the board?
Yes. I think there's two things which are driving this. One is, again, this shift towards completely online working. It made all of the top management in the commission really aware how dependent they are on digital. And I have to say, we have never had so much praise in our department. We were always the kind of people only noticed us when things went wrong. Now, every time I do a presentation, we get compliments from the top managers and the staff about how Digit managed to help the commission survive last year. So that respect is there, and I think also with that very big increase in cyber threats during last year, because the attackers knew that people were more exposed based on home networks and so forth and isolated, then there's a bigger awareness at top management level, not just in the boards, but across the board, I would say, of the role of cyber. So that whole process has sensitized the Commission as an organization from top to bottom. On the other side, of course, the Commission is a political organization, and cybersecurity has become one of the top priorities of the Commission as a policy-making body. So we've adopted, July last year, we adopted a new European Union security strategy overall, and then in December, there was a cybersecurity strategy, which included the internal provisions. So it's not just what we're telling member states to do and private organizations in Europe, but actually what we are doing for ourselves. So actually we are working on that with the other institutions, bodies and agencies, and there are about 80, 90 of them, to create sort of a completely joined up common approach to information security and cybersecurity across the board. So this visibility is being driven from both sides, and that means it's made my life a lot easier. Just as the lockdown, in a sense, promoted digital transformation, the cyber threats and the political situation have driven awareness about cyber, and I find that I get a much more receptive and proactive audience than I did maybe 2 years ago.
That really sounds good.
Really good, yeah.
What about at staff level? I mean, I assume that staff needed support in transitioning to remote work and to stay safe online. And so how did your team supported the staff in this change? And as well, I guess this was organizational cultural shifting.
Yeah. So we saw a big rise in interest amongst staff, and we had a bumper year last year. We actually have the Cyber Aware Governance Board, so we have this internal structure which is led by my team, but also has the security directorate involved, who's also responsible for physical security and other things. But also the guys in the policy departments, DG Connect, our colleagues in the CERTIU, which is the cyber emergency response team for all of the institutions, and the Secretariat General and the HR training department. So all these, we come together and we are promoting the cyber awareness. We have the governance board this afternoon, today. And what we've been just looking at the results for the year. And last year we had 8,000 participants. So in an organization of 35,000 officials, 8,000 is a pretty fair participation level in all sorts of activities we were running. So a lot of briefing sessions for staff, for senior managers, particularly senior managers have been doing a lot for cabinet level, so the political level, a big interest in these things. We've been giving a lot of updates on our portal and on the more general internal news sites about how to stay safe, both in personal but also in professional, how to avoid scams. We've been reporting on the latest scams, which there was a very high turnover of those things last year. We organise lunchtime talks. We run induction sessions, which we now do remotely for new staff, in-depth briefings and so on. So the whole thing is really advanced a lot. And in the governance board, we should discuss about whether that's a blip or whether that's something we can maintain. We are really interested in maintaining it because now we have people's attention. We have to see how we can do that. One way we're doing that is we, for the first time, we have ability to run fake phishing exercises across the whole organization. So we did that at the beginning of this year, 40,000 emails going out. And we're looking at the results now, and we're targeting training for people and support in order to try and get that behavior change. So a lot of work there ongoing. And I think, again, we try to make it fun. We try to make it interactive. We run a lot of events. We do this with external parties. It's not all about fear and doom and gloom. It's really about, this can be something which is really interesting. And let me just tell you a little bit, because something we've been working on for some years, is we've actually developed a cyber training program last year. We launched it. And actually, we launched it on International Women's Day last year. And we put out a recruitment. So we would take people who are internal staff, not with a cyber background, not even necessarily with an IT background, and give them training so that they can actually work in cyber inside of the commission. So we had 24 people taking part, and 21 of them
sounds
were women.
Great.
But 21 of them were women. So
Wow.
that's really
that
important
sounds
because
great.
this is a very male-dominated
Yeah, exactly.
So we're very
Very
proud
cool.
of that. And I think that shows that it's something for everybody.
Definitely.
I have a question that just came. I mean, it may be silly, but I was just wondering, the number of cyber attacks you detect per month must be incredible. I mean, it's a European Commission. Whoever enters that has an incredible power to negotiate things, whatever he or she wants.
Yeah, we don't reveal these figures, but in terms of events, we're logging it's in the gigabytes, and then if you talk about what our cyber our perimeter defenses detect, it's in hundreds of millions, of which about 95% of them get stopped at the perimeter, and that's a lot of the sort of phishing, malicious spam, things like that. I mean, we don't talk about those things. Sometimes we're asked how many attacks did we suffer last year, and it's impossible to know because the vast majority of them are automated, and we have to be very, very careful in the cloud and in terms of vulnerability. We have a very dynamic vulnerability scanning service because we want to find the vulnerabilities before the attacker does. So when a new critical vulnerability is announced, we immediately, and this is part of our 24/7, we immediately look to see what the vulnerability profile is, and we try to fix it really fast. So that's the level of things. We of course we get also probably the two big things for us, as everybody, is cybercrime. But actually, mostly cybercrime is opportunistic. They go for the easy targets. The guy who has an alarm on his door will probably less likely to get broken into than the person next door. But also, there is also for us a big concern around political espionage. We're a political organization. We sit at the crossroads of Europe. Somebody who gets into our systems, of course, to some extent can find out what's going on elsewhere. So political espionage, this is something we spend a lot of time working on. It makes my life of recruiting the top specialists to work on detection and response a little bit easier, because these guys are very interested in the more exotic stuff rather than the kind of the routine things. But nevertheless, that is it's probably our number one concern in terms of what we call advanced persistent threats, and we have a pretty good record, I think, of managing against it. But I don't want to boast about it too much, because it just encourages people to come and take a pop at us.
And Ken, let's play the futurists now, because the next question is about changes in technology and the way we work. That do you expect to see in the future? Let's play the fortune tellers now.
Yeah.
Do you foresee anything that it's coming in technology in general, but
Yeah.
in
Well,
cybersecurity?
immediate short term is this issue I raised about not our infrastructure. So we've moved to a situation where an increasing amount of our business is not traditional defense of our infrastructure, but is defending the infrastructure of other people, which of course is that much more difficult by definition. So cloud, and in cloud, I think the infrastructure level is kind of covered, certainly for the big providers. We just need to make sure we do this in an orderly way. But software as a service worries me because, you know, there's so many different varieties of it. There is a lot of lack of transparency about how it's configured. And we are investing quite heavily on being able to try to understand that. But it's a big worry. What we see also is this proliferation of platforms. So the more platforms we have, the more difficult it is for us to manage. So that whole business of, you know, once you start using other people's infrastructure, we've invested a lot with our colleagues in CertiU also around social media and social media platforms. That's also been a big challenge. And that's something where we need to find a way of industrializing this because we aren't able to fully defend all of our social media footprint because it's just so diverse, and that's a big concern. Particularly, you know, with all the people working from home and using different sorts of devices and so forth, this is something which is just difficult to manage. So more mobile also means people are more vulnerable. So that's in a sense the short-term thing. And then longer term, the thing around Internet of Things is not such a big deal for our organization. Although all sorts of devices which are interacting with your home network is of course a concern because we've seen that some attackers are trying to hop from the home network or maybe the network in your car into your corporate devices. I mean, that's we see as an attack vector we have to try and understand a bit better. And then there's the whole issue around artificial intelligence. You know, one of my favorite jokes is if it's written in Python, it's probably machine learning. But if it's written in PowerPoint, it's probably artificial intelligence. So that's a quote. And then, but my concern there is the attackers are using machine learning techniques to automate attacks, which makes the whole thing much more virulent.
Right, exactly.
And we have to use the same things going back, and we're doing a lot of what we call cyber threat hunting using machine learning techniques to try and find stuff that would not be discovered by the typical kind of signature-based detection that's been what people have been using.
But you know, this morning I read an article on 5G and the kind of a slow adoption of it. So maybe the Internet of Things might have to wait to get more spread in our daily lives.
Well,
because it really needs 5G.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not going to speculate on that for the moment because that's, in a sense, it's somewhere down the track in terms of threats risks that we have to manage. But certainly the whole transformation of the telecoms infrastructure and the way that we embed ourselves as users of that is something which needs to be thought about. And we, of course, we're exposed to that to some extent. If the telcos are not doing their side of the business, it makes it difficult. I mean, but this is not new. If you look at internet email spoofing, a lot of the things that the telcos could do in terms of dynamic protection frameworks and things like that have not necessarily been done. So there is a need there. And I think that's where our colleagues in the policy department are so important, because they're creating the landscape of security in which we have to work. And of course, we have a lot to do with other organizations.
Interesting. The landscape of security. I like that a lot. Ken. So, Carla, you have a last question, I think.
I do. We are running out of time, in fact. So the last question I have is if you have any anecdote to share with us in times of lockdown. I mean,
it's like the novel Love in the Time of Cholera. I think it's like that.
One of my
Gabriel García Márquez.
Exactamente.
It's one of my favorite books and authors.
No he leído en español, pero...
Ah, wow.
Podría ser.
Hablas español. Perfecto.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and the only two I could come up with, I think, is things. One is that one of my fellow CISOs reported something that they discovered while people were home working, which was that staff didn't necessarily recognize the fact if they were streaming porno content and pirated films over the VPN, they might get discovered. So that's one of the things. It's VPN protects you, but not from illegal activities. And the other one, which I like a lot, is we've been discussing a lot about messaging, instant messaging applications, which we're a little bit hesitant to recommend to our staff because the instant messaging applications, of course, they have end-to-end crypto, which means that we can't then do any, or colleagues in the security directorate can't do any kind of check back to see what happens to our information. But we recommended amongst the more secure apps, Signal, about a year and a half ago. And somebody said, well, so what's the proof that Signal is more secure? And Edward Snowden wrote back on Signal, I'm still alive.
Okay.
Voila.
Okay.
All right. So thanks very much.
Thanks to you for joining.
Thanks to you for joining
Yes.
us. It was a very, very nice conversation, and you have shared a lot of nice tips and knowledge and anecdotes on what happened at the European Commission. I guess most companies have incredible anecdotes about these times. Also, yeah, it's very, very special times. Once there is always a word used everywhere, and it's unprecedented, which I hate. But I prefer to say once at a time. It's something like that. It is a nice expression, a more poetic expression to describe these times. But anyway, thanks a lot, and thanks, Carla, for being there as well.
It's been a pleasure.
And well, this is TechTalk, technology made simple. Over a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got
or
it.
a cup of tea.
Or a cup
Or a
of
cup
tea.
of tea. Sorry, let's be diverse. Let's be more diverse.
And inclusive.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
have a good day and enjoy
Have
your
a good day.
lockdown.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
And that's all for today. This is Tech Talk, technology made simple over a cup of coffee, or tea, like Ken remarked. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode.